Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, June 11th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today, as always, we have a great number of feasts, so we'll start off in Flanders, France, where we have Our Lady of Esquernay. I think that's how it's pronounced. So the shrine of Our Lady of Esquernay lies half a league, that's definitely Orsini talking there, half a league from Lille in Flanders, France. This image began to work miracles about the year 1162 and is still venerated even today. So we're told that tradition says that the painter responsible for painting the image of Mary at the shrine was putting all his effort and talent in order to depict the Mother of God as beautiful as he could. However, at some point the devil decided to intervene, and so Our Lady suspended the priest in mid-air until the bishop arrived to pronounce the exorcism, and the evil one didn't bother the painter anymore. Okay, there you have it. Then we go down to Lebanon, where we have Our Lady of Mantara in Magdouche, in Sidon, it says South Governorate, whatever that means. If you're familiar with the divisions of Lebanon, it's in Lebanon. So we are told that when Jesus preached in Sidon, Mary is said to have waited here in the cave of Mantara, which means awaiting in Arabic. It was Emperor Constantine's wife, Helena. Was it wife or mother? Anyways, yeah, here it says wife. Replaced a shrine that had been dedicated to some goddess with a shrine dedicated to Our Lady, donating an icon and all the furnishings needed. But 3 centuries later, after it was taken over by an intolerant Arab ruler, Christians simply sealed up the cave and they fled the location. In 1683, many years later, descendants of the exiles returned to their homeland and through the good wishes of one of the Muslim princes. On September 8th, 1721, when a goat fell through a gap in the limestone, the young shepherd made a rope from vine twigs, tied it to a tree, and followed the animal into the hole, thinking he would grab it and bring it back out, but the rope broke. The child fell into the darkness, where eventually he made out the golden glimmer of an icon of the Madonna with Child. Now, on seeing the image, the Melkite Catholic clergy recognized it as this lost image from St. Helen. So what did they do? Well, they built a cathedral there, and in 1860, which was completed with a modern tower topped with a bronze statue in the 1960s. Now, we're told that on June 11th, 1911, some 400 people saw a silent, luminous apparition of the Madonna with Child near the cave. Okay, so that's why we're celebrating today, June 11th. Next up, we have Madonna di Viganale in Monte Crestese, Verbocusio Ossola in Piedmont, Italy. Right? So the celebration today recalls when the image bled on June 11th, 1651. So a lot of times these images bleed when their people aren't devout. But on the contrary, this little chapel was known for the great devotion of the people, right? And so they would actually take this image in, the people would go to the church and pray, right? And this started because of what took place on June 11th, 1651, right? Which we're told that year it was the Sunday after the octave of Corpus Christi, right? And usually because it was the day dedicated to Saint Barnabas, they would celebrate the entire day. So again, when people would walk through the streets, they would pass by this image that was painted. It doesn't say here, I assume it's painted on an exterior wall. And people would stop, pray, and, say a quick prayer, make an act of reverence to God and his saints, right? And so some people were going to church that morning in order to listen to the Holy Mass. And they passed by this little chapel on the side of the road. And just the same thing, right, to pray. When they noticed there was like a red line that seemed like blood coming, that was like going down the cheek of Our Lady. And at that point, it ended on her chest. So 2 people saw this, and one of them thought, okay, yeah, whatever, this is just, some stupid thing. Somebody obviously, had, maybe like a cherry hit it and made it look like it bled, right? However, another person walking by said, no, look, it looks like something is very, very different, right? In fact, it looks like it really does look like it's blood, right? So, again, what happened? People started coming and praying in front of it. And yeah, it definitely looked like it was blood. And so on June 10th, 1860, after a great spiritual preparation, the bishop solemnly crowned the miraculous image and even gave indulgences to people who went to visit it. Next up then, in Casalbordino in Chieti, we have Madonna dei Miracoli, Our Lady of the Miracles. So we are told that this was a merciful manifestation of Mary on June 11th, 1576, to an old farmer named Alessandro Muzio, right? Because the day before, which happened to be Pentecost that year, there was a very strong hailstorm which had destroyed all the crops in the area. So this pious farmer decided to go and check out his fields and see how things were going. He was sure that everything was going to be destroyed. As he was walking down the streets, he heard the bells of the church ring, ringing to announce the moment of the elevation of the host, right? So what did he do? He stopped, he knelt down and prayed. And so at that very moment, the Virgin Mary appeared to him and said that his field was intact. Don't worry. And this would be a sign that she had appeared to him and of the authenticity of her request of conversion and penance in order to prevent further punishments merited by the citizens' grave sins, especially for profaning the feast day. So now there is a huge shrine in Casalbordino to recall this apparition. Likewise, we have Virgen de la Capilla in Jaén, Andalusia, Spain, so Our Lady of the Chapel. And again, this also commemorates an apparition on June 11th, 1430. So the devotion to La Virgen de la Capilla is actually very well documented. So we're told that when Jaén was captured by the Muslims in 1246, the city kind of took on this sort of frontier character because it was right in between the Muslims, I guess, and the Christian forces. So in the beginning of the 15th century, there were a lot of, the attacks increased. And so what happened? Well, according to tradition, the Virgin Mary came down to the city on the night between the 10th and the 11th of June, 1430, accompanied by a huge group of heavenly beings, right? Which came from, and they went from the cathedral until the church of Sant Ildefonso, right? There's actually a number of witnesses to the events, and they talk about it, how she came down on the night of the 10th of June, 1430, and then I guess through the morning, and said it was a grand procession of just a very vivid, luminous persons, right? There were 7 people who appeared to be men who carried crosses, and it seemed like these crosses belonged to, they were the parish crosses of each of the parishes in the church, right? And so there is there was a woman who seemed much taller than the other ones, dressed in white robes, and it just seemed a beautiful face, brighter than the sun. This is the description I'm reading here in the Spanish testimonies. But it says that behind her there were some 300 people, men and women, who were holding on to her skirt. So that's very interesting. And again, they went from the cathedral church, the biggest church, to the chapel of St. Ildefonsus, right? And so what did they do? Well, they gathered together the witnesses, and they actually made them make a public declaration. And so, sure enough, right, what they said was, according to the faithful people, the lady who appeared must have been the Virgin Mary with the child Jesus in her arms, accompanied by St. Ildefonsus and St. Catherine and angels and saints, right? And the reason for this coming down was simply to give them courage and strength to resist the attacks of the Muslims, right? And we can say certainly from that point on, 1430 until 1492, the people of that town resisted all the successes of attacks and were able to destroy the Muslims eventually and kick them out. And last but not least, I want to add an interesting fact. This is Madre di Bisognosi, like Our Lady of the Poor in Peretro, L'Aquila, Abruzzo. So this shrine, there's a beautiful image, it's a statue, which is said to be miraculous. We mention it today because the shrine was so famous even back in the 600s that Pope Saint Boniface IV was very, very sick. So he cried out and made a prayer to Our Lady of the Needy, Our Lady of the Poor, and after that he was healed. And so he was super sick, and then he was healed. So he went up the mountain and he prayed to Mary and gave the church sacred vestments, a lot of money, and an image of Christ crucified, which is still there in the church. And that visit took place on June 11th, 610. And so that is what we're celebrating today in the Marian world on June 11th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we start with meditation 79, entitled The Threefold Crown. And here, the subtitle is The Crown of Power. If you remember, this was something he mentioned in the last meditation about Mary ascending into heaven and being crowned in heaven. And he said, if you recall, that she was crowned by the Father with the crown of power, by the Son with the crown of wisdom, and by the Holy Spirit with the crown of love. So now he's going to take some meditations to explain each of those crowns and what he means by them. So we start with the crown of power. Mary was crowned with the threefold crown of power, wisdom, and love. Let us pause to consider the beauty and grandeur of this threefold crown. First, God's omnipotence. Consider first the infinite power of God. Rightly do we call him all-powerful. He can do all, and nothing can stand against his will. Sometimes we are tempted to believe that men also can do many things. How many wonderful inventions, what skill and power they display. And yet, how small is the power of men in comparison with the power of God? At the moment when mankind seems on the brink of some great discovery, it often happens that some great difficulty crops up, which they are unable to overcome. How often do we want something done but cannot achieve it? Or we want to stop some force and we find ourselves powerless? In front of a tomb, think of the power of men, and you will smile. No one can halt death indefinitely. Science must ultimately be overcome. Nor can the decay of the body in the tomb be averted. On the contrary, look at the unrestricted power of God. He did as he wished, as he wanted, when he wanted, with no other agency to impose limits except his holy will. The whole creation cost him no effort. No loss of energy, no help from his angels, no time was required for his achievement. Things sprang into existence immediately, out of nothingness, in obedience to his command. No other act was needed save the act of his divine will. And even now he keeps and preserves all existence. Everything is in his hands. Should he wish to send the whole creation to nothingness, he would just have to withhold his hands and power. He has only to abandon us to ourselves. All the power of all men together cannot create, cannot bring a single blade of grass into existence out of nothingness, cannot out of nothingness shape a little ant or a little worm. It cannot even send back to nothingness a little insect or anything existing. That is why the angels gather around his throne, trembling in front of his power and majesty, all obeying his least desire reverently, eager to carry it into execution. This devouring fire, those mighty masses of water, this glorious air, that gigantic impetus of the seas, those complicated movements of the planets and stars that crowd space, everything in one word, life and death, health and illness, time and eternity, is subject to God. Everything is under his command. For today's reading from The Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we continue with the 9th part, chapter 2, 12 methods of practicing this devotion, devotion to Mary's Admirable Heart. And today we'll read the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th methods. 3. One of the most useful and important ways of honoring the most worthy heart of the Queen of Virtues is to strive to imitate and implant in your heart a lively image of her holiness, meekness and forbearance, humility, purity, devotion, wisdom and prudence, patience, obedience, vigilance, faithfulness, love, and all its other virtues. 4th, offer your heart frequently to the Queen of all hearts, consecrated to Jesus, and implore her to take full and complete possession of your heart, so that Mary may give it entirely to her Son, fill it with supernatural sentiments to adorn it with virtues, and mold it according to the heart of the Divine Son and his Blessed Mother. 5th, Assist the poor, widows, orphans, and strangers. Protect the helpless. Console the afflicted. Visit the sick and imprisoned, and perform other similar works of mercy. All these acts that are most highly pleasing to the most merciful heart of the Mother of Grace. Sixth, the greatest joy that we can afford the admirable heart of Mary, all aflame with love for the souls which cost the precious blood of her Son, is to work zealously and devotedly for their salvation. If the hearts of the angels and saints in heaven rejoice for each conversion of a sinner, the Queen of Angels and Saints derives infinitely more joy than that of all the denizens of heaven combined, because her heart possesses more love and charity.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.